Smile Breakfast.
On Smile Breakfast, the honest truth.
With Benito Vergotino. Smile 90.4 FM.
In the weeks prior to the medium-term budget policy statement, South Africans await more clarity from Treasury on the proposal for limited pre-retirement withdrawals and the logistics required to make it happen. Joining us to chat more about this is the advisory partner at Citadel, Paul Leonard. Paul, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Benito. It's great to be here. Thank you.
What are your thoughts on this proposal, Paul?
Well, it's a bit of a conundrum. If I can just take a few steps back. So retirement planning is actually quite simple. All you've got to do is start saving early, and then the best time to start saving, of course, is when you get your first salary check. But of course, that's the last thing on your mind is retirement. And then you just need to keep saving. And if you move jobs, don't withdraw. And then you need to get above inflation returns on your savings, and you do that long enough, and you'll be fine. The problem is that most people don't make it. We know that the statistics say that something like 90% or 95% of people who reach retirement age can't afford to retire. So what has to happen is governments around the world need to encourage their citizens to save. And they do this in a number of ways. And one of the ways is through what could be called paternalistic legislation. And that means legislation where the government knows best and they're telling you what you should do. But there's a concept called Libertarian Paternalism. This is where the government suggests what you should do, but they stop short of making the decision for you. So, in other words, it's paternalistic in the sense that they are pushing you or nudging you in the direction that you should go. However, they will give you the choice. So you're actually able to opt out. In other words, of their options that they're giving you. So that's what a lot of the recent legislation that's been introduced for retirement is. It's kind of structured around this idea of libertarian paternalism. In other words, the government gives us a strong nudge in the right direction. However, the libertarian part is where you are able to, for example, access your funds. And so with COVID, and in fact this conversation was started before COVID, where government was looking or considering the option where if people got themselves into trouble or they were facing an emergency, they would be able to make a withdrawal from their funds. Now, this is kind of made even more urgent, or the discussion perhaps was made even more urgent by this by COVID, because people found themselves in very difficult situations. So now they've tabled this, giving the idea of giving people access to their retirement funds. But the conundrum is, if they do that, it's counter to the idea of encouraging people to save and to not and to preserve their savings, not to withdraw their savings.
Yes. Because I'm sorry to interrupt, Paul, because I would imagine we would be nudged to continue saving and not to withdraw it. What are the risks if we do decide to withdraw? How do we recoup those funds that we are withdrawing?
Well, it's very difficult. You can't. And if you do any sort of calculation, illustrating the benefits of compounding over time, as soon as you withdraw, you stop that compounding, and if you withdraw all of your funds, for example, you go back to zero, and there's absolutely no way to get that time back again. So one of the things they're doing is in the press release, the media statement from National Treasury, they said they're looking at ways of giving people limited pre-retirement withdrawals, but then that's then going to be accompanied by compulsory preservation in the future. Now, we're not sure exactly what that is going to look like, but it seems to imply that, okay, you can take some of your money, but going forward, you're not going to be able to take any more, and we are going to force you to preserve going forward. Something to that effect. So they're trying to balance out these opposing kind of objectives.
Is there a limit to the amount of funds that one can withdraw?
That we don't know yet. So there are a number of things that we're waiting for clarity on, and the Treasury said that they would tell us either close to or in the medium-term budget policy statement, which we now know is going to be on the 4th of November. So we hope there's going to be more clarity. But that's one of the points where we are yet to be given some clarity. I think it was some of the trade unions were saying, make it 30,000 rand or something like that, or some people were banding around the figure of 30%, but that's just speculation. That still has to be clarified.
Yeah, I would imagine as well, so this will probably have an impact on existing systems, retirement fund rules, Paul?
Yeah, so it's quite a complex thing, and if you think about it, Benito, it's not there's a number of laws or acts which have to be changed. So, for example, the Pension Funds Act has to be changed to allow for pre-retirement withdrawals. Currently, you can withdraw, but only if you resign or you are retrenched and so on. But you can't do so if you stay employed. So they're trying, so that the legislation has to be changed to allow for that. And also, they're looking to change the legislation around so that you can also make withdrawals from a retirement annuity. So and of course, one of the other hot potatoes is that the government employees pension fund is not governed by the Pension Funds Act. So they will not be entitled to make the same withdrawals. And so, understandably, a lot of government employees are quite upset by that.
How has the financial sector responded to this?
The CISA, which is the Association of Savings and Investment in South Africa, released a statement very shortly after government or Treasury released theirs. And basically they said that the industry does support and is aware and is aware of, that people are struggling. So, and they support the idea of being able to access. But, it's tempered with the idea that, there's no possible quick fix, because they also, the industry also referred to the fact that legislation has to be changed. But not only that, administrators of these funds are going to have to update and change their systems. And also they're talking about a two-bucket approach going forward, where, for example, one bucket will be a bucket which is preserved. Your contributions into that bucket cannot be touched, and they'll be preserved until you get to retirement. And the other bucket will be a bucket that you can dip into. Now, the administration systems have to be set up in such a way that they can keep track of both of those buckets, and they're not set up for that.
And what would be the respective size of those buckets?
Well, once again, that's one of the other things that we have yet to get clarity on. So there's a lot of consultation going on between Treasury and the various stakeholders, and it is complex. And because it's so complex, I mean, they estimate that there's no way this can actually happen before 2022. And some of the aspects might even be later than that, because of the complexities around the legislation and also the administration systems.
As you mentioned, a lot still has to be discussed, but just on the face of it, will this impact upon our retirement fund contribution? Then should you, for example, access your funds, surely in terms of maintaining the kind of retirement level that you had before, would that not mean that one's contribution increases?
Well, that I'm not sure, but in a lot of funds there is member choice, and right now the amount that we contribute to retirement funds is not prescriptive unless we, for example, work for an employer where they prescribe look, if you work for a company and they have a retirement fund, you have to belong to the retirement fund.
Yes.
And they will have minimums that you need to contribute. It's up to you. A lot of these funds give you the facility to contribute more if you want to. No, but Benito, this is the conundrum. Yes, we need to be nudged to save and to preserve, but if planning for retirement is no good if we have no food on the table right now, or we're struggling because there's a real emergency. But absolutely, you're right. If we draw the money, we're going to lose out on the future compounding of that, and so we should actually then increase our contributions to make up for the lost compounding on that capital. But what we don't know that's going to be. What we do know is that they are saying, okay, you're going to consider giving you the option to withdraw some money, but that's going to be tempered with compulsory preservation going forward. We're not exactly sure. So we know there's going to be some sort of compulsory preservation option or preservation requirement going forward, but I haven't seen anything relating to compulsory increases in contributions.
Well, I suppose on a practical side, if you are accessing your funds, you're probably not in a position to increase the contribution currently, but possibly down the line.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're not yet sure, other than the global pandemic and COVID, what will constitute particular, and they define it as particular unexpected circumstances, emergencies, or extraordinary circumstances. So we're not quite sure what the definition of those will be, other than we know that people are struggling now because of COVID and so on.
The paternalistic side of its aspect of the legislation, as you described, do you foresee that to be quite onerous, so that there wouldn't be any loopholes where people could access their funds recklessly?
Yes, I mean that is always a risk. That people take advantage of these loopholes. And in fact, in some of the retirement reform legislation which has been introduced recently, some of the discussions were around de minimis, where if you, for example, leave an employer, there are now what's called default preservation rules. So what that means, what a default is basically if you don't choose, what do you end up with if you make no active choice? So default design is very important. So trustees, pension funds have now been are now compelled to have default preservation funds, or they're compelled to design default preservation. So in other words, should a person resign, they don't choose to withdraw or transfer their money, that money must be put into a paid-up status in the fund, and it must be a good option for them. So the default design must be in the member's benefit. So now the loophole could have been if they put in minimums and said, well, if the fund value that we're busy preserving is below a certain amount, then it has to pay out. That could have been a loophole where people start resigning and that sort of thing just to get the money to pay out. And it's not the kind of behavior. So you don't want unintended consequences and through loopholes that people spot.
Especially if you're trying to encourage all of us to save, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. So hence it's a conundrum. And it is a conundrum because they're pulled apart. And we all know from behavioral finance and that 1 rand today is worth a lot more than even 4 rand in 20 years' time, because 20 years' time and 4 rand is a long way away. So
true. Paul, where could our listeners find out further information around this?
Yes, so we're at Citadel, and you can visit www.citadel.co.za. And of course, what I found is a great resource is the National Treasury's website. So if you're into reading technical stuff, they have all the media statements there as well. So that's the raw information, uninterpreted. But yes.
Paul Leonard, Advisory Partner at Citadel. Appreciate your time, Paul. Thank you so much for outlining this to us. It certainly is a conundrum, as you pointed out. Thank you.
Thanks, Benito. It's been great. Thank you.
If you'd like to reflect upon Paul's thoughts, remember our conversations are available for you either via the Smile 90.4 FM app, which you're welcome to download, or on our website at smile904.fm. So quite a few unanswered questions, and certainly can appreciate the conundrum that Paul clearly outlined for us. So certainly a lot will be clarified, certainly we hope, in the medium-term budget policy statement coming up in November. But from our discussion with Paul, a couple of unanswered questions which hopefully will be answered as part of that medium-term budget policy statement. How the split between the two buckets, for example, will be determined. Also, aside from the global pandemic, what then in future will constitute particular unexpected circumstances, emergencies, or extraordinary circumstances to justify these early withdrawals, and how much will be accessible to members given access to their retirement savings. Just on the face of it, though, how do you feel about this particular proposal? I just think it's so risky having access to those funds which are meant for later in life. Then again, there are circumstances, particularly in light of the pandemic, which may warrant it, and certainly in light of the economic challenges which we are certainly all on our domestic, provincial and national level are confronting. How does this make you feel? Share your thoughts. 0829 904 904 on the SMS line at 35904. The president earlier in his address, in fact, spoke about the UK red list, and joining